All right, there we go. Hello, hello. I'm going to get the live started over here on Instagram. Instagram's a little delayed, and that's all right. Hello, friends in TikTok world. Hello, hello. I see Yessie popped in. Hey, Yessie, can you have a good morning, Shelley? Can you do like a little tag that tells people that they can see Reverend Todd on YouTube? Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Good morning. So this morning we've got Reverend Todd Leonard. Woohoo! So excited.
My day's finishing while your day's beginning, actually.
That's true. That's right. You're coming live from Japan. Now, where in Japan are you?
Not that well, I'm on Kyushu Island, which is the southern island south of Honshu, which is the main island where Tokyo is and everything. And I live in Fukuoka, which is the largest prefecture city in the Kyushu area, the island that I live on. And I've been here 15 years, but I've been in Japan for 36 years.
Oh my gosh.
So I lived up north for 20 years. And then we moved down to Fukuoka. I was offered a tenured position at a national university here. So we decided to move down here, and we love it. I like it down here. It's subtropical. Wow. It gets really hot in the summer, and we're getting kind of gearing up for our rainy season. So it's going to be very hot and muggy very soon. Today it's kind of cool because it hasn't really hit yet, but it will get stifling hot.
Yeah, you lived in Indiana, so you understand.
Oh yeah, no, I know. It's very summers are humid, yeah.
Yeah, but
more
no
so
benefit.
down here.
Yeah, there's no benefit of the tropical part. It's just hot.
Yeah. We have palm trees. It gets cold in the winter. People ask me, it gets down to maybe 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So, you know, it could get to freezing, but it doesn't last more than a day. So palm trees aren't affected by it. So, but you do have to have heat on inside, things like that.
Okay. All right. All right. So as we're kind of getting people in the rooms here, we're getting people joining the lives. Good morning, everybody. Lovely. Hi, Liz. I see you over there on Instagram. And how's everybody doing? What are we all sipping on? So I call this spirit signs and sips because I always have something in my hand to drink.
Mm-hmm.
And no judgment, whether it's coffee, mimosa. We don't judge here.
Very good.
So I always give everybody a chance to tell us what they're sipping on. Looking to see. I'm going to turn this off. Make sure I have my settings right. Okay, good. So yeah, so we have Reverend Todd Leonard in the house on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We're going to be listening on TikTok for those of you who are only doing TikTok. And so make sure if you can, go watch from the other platforms, Lorena Carr Medium on YouTube, again, YouTube, Facebook, all the things, because we're going to be talking about the Bang sisters. We're talking about Camp Chesterfield. We're talking about mediumship. We're talking about history. And then, another thing I want to talk with you about is that movie that's being made.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Camp Chesterfield. And because I know you're
Ghost from the River.
Yes, Ghost on the River, where I inadvertently blended energy with the star of that movie. That I didn't realize, not the star, but
the spirit that is being emphasized in it. Yeah, I think I saw that. You did I think that was on YouTube, I think, where you did like a little seance in there and he came through.
Yes.
So that was very interesting.
It was supposed to just be the headphones, like the paranormal investigation, because I'm not a certified trance medium, so we don't do that on campus.
Right.
But I had never used the headphones before, and they're like, "All right, let's see if we can get Lorenda to do this and see what picks up. Let's see what happens." And I had just been getting all these interesting words, and I could feel the tingles. and I had like an interaction with that painting the day before.
Interesting.
But didn't understand why, or, what. I had no idea that was going to lead to what it did. And so that was pretty wild because I believe I said, I'm coming, or there's something about, like, I was just saying what I was hearing, and all of a sudden I felt it, and I'm like, I could full on trance right now. Like I could have brought him through, done trance mediumship. However, again, there's that part of me that knows that it was, one, being recorded. Two, I didn't want to disrespect the rules of Camp Chesterfield grounds, because I value my place there. And
absolutely.
So, but I was like, oh, this is wild. It was pretty wild. So and I don't think I realized at the time that they were making a movie about it. When that happened, I didn't know who that kid was.
Well, that's evidential confirmation right there.
I know. So for me, I didn't know. Anybody else watching could have been like, well, she knew all that, and I get that. But I didn't. All I knew was Don had drowned. And I knew that because the little thing by the painting says so.
Right. I think we do have something there that explains that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of my little projects I did once, was to explain each painting, because people always had questions about the painting. So I made little tags to go next to each one, so that people would have some sort of starting point. If they were just going through the museum by themselves, that they'd be able to have some sort of an experience without having a docent tell them everything that's going on with each painting.
Right. Well, okay. So let's start there. Since we're talking about museum, let's start there. Let's talk about how you got involved in the because you were a big part of restoring and like getting things set up and making the museum what it is now. And is it Het?
Het, yeah.
Okay.
HETT, the Het Art Museum and Gallery and Art Museum. Yeah. Art Gallery and Museum. So yeah, it was the brainchild of Mabel Riffle, actually, going way back to the late 1940s. She really wanted to have a repository for all the artifacts and art that was related to not only Camp Chesterfield, but spiritualism in general. So she was very good at securing those types of things. So she found benefactors, and Mr. Het was, I think Dr. Het actually was very much interested in spiritualism. And so she was able to convince him to make a large donation to make the actual museum. And at the time, it was a lot of money, of course. In today's money, we'd probably knock us over, what it initially cost to do something like that. And she was very good at getting the things to fill it up, the artifacts. So we have lots of actual memorabilia from the Fox sisters, the Fox sisters family. We have the Fox Taylor records, the handwritten diaries. And those are pretty fascinating, because if you think about what they represent, it was basically Katie Fox, one of the original Fox sisters, had a terrible drinking problem. And both of the girls had terrible alcoholism. And that's basically what killed both of them in the end.
I knew that. Interesting.
Yeah. So Katie had gone on a drinking binge, and then she was passed out in the street. I think it was in New York. And Sarah Taylor found her, and they had a clinic. So they took her back to the clinic. And as she started to sober up, they realized who she was. They had no idea when they found her. And it's like one of the founders of spiritualism, the Fox sisters. So they, Katie just started doing these wonderful messages, and Mrs. Taylor had the foresight to write it down. So the handwritten diaries that she wrote down when Katie was in their care, we have those originals in the Head Art Gallery and Museum. So it's, yeah. And I think that the reason, I do know that John Fox, Katie and Maggie's father, had an alcoholism, but he was able to get ahead of it, thankfully. But when the girls were first doing their mediumship, they would be invited to a lot of fancy parties, and they thought it was really cute to give the young girls champagne and see their little cheeks, get red and things. And they developed a taste for it, a taste that they were never able to beat. And I think Maggie even went so far as to go on some sort of pills as well at one point. So they both had addiction problems.
Wow, I had no idea about the Foxes. I've never done like a deep dive on them. I've seen at the museum, I've seen some of the references for them, but I always get caught up in the precipitation art. I could just stand in that area,
Right.
like, look at that for hours.
Well, I oftentimes compare the Fox sisters to some of the starlets today, like Lindsay Lohan or Paris Hilton, where they're very young, they're thrown into the spotlight, and they had a stage mother, let's face it. The older sister was like a stage mother to them. She was much older, more would be like an aunt's age when they were born. So when she realized that they had the gift, and that's when she went into big sister mode of being stage mom, and she was the one that really pushed them, and they developed a real intense hatred for their older sister Leah. And because Leah, each time she married up, and they felt like that she enriched herself at their expense, in other words. So it was a very contentious relationship that they had with their older sister. They hated her. And even when they denounced spiritualism at one point, it was more or less to get back at her. Even though they both denounced it, Katie never gave it up. She continued to do mediumship throughout that time. The death blow to spiritualism, I think, is what they called it. And again, they were promised a lot of money, and Katie had a child, and so she was worried about her child's future as a single mother, because her husband had passed away. He was a German person. And then, of course, Maggie, her big love of her life was Elijah Kent Kane. He was the Arctic explorer and the Philadelphia high society elite. And his family were just absolutely mortified that he had fallen in love with her and did everything they could to break him up. But they secretly married, which in those days, basically marriage meant you just said, we're married. There was no real,
no big to do
paper or anything like that. And they had a witness. I think the maid was a witness or something. But again, his life was rather tragic because he had so many health issues. And then when he died, the family tried desperately to get all the love letters, but she at least was smart enough to keep those for herself. And that is a book actually that you can read, the love letters between the two of them. It's available. Mm-hmm.
What's the name of that book?
Oh gosh,
that's okay.
Yeah, sorry.
We can add it later. It's fine.
Yeah, please, because I want to say it's like the love letters between Maggie Fox and Elijah Kent Kane, I think. And he had to go to Cuba to recuperate after some of his illnesses and things. And he had a very hard time on his last Arctic expedition. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the things that separated them. But they still maintained their love. And again, his family was just absolutely against that pairing completely because they, Philadelphia high society, and they didn't want their name sullied, with one of the original Fox sisters of this newfangled religion that no one really quite understood. And you had the really devout believers, but you had those who really poo-pooed it as well, which is still true today.
Well, it's like I don't think anything's changed there. Like
No.
we still get it as, and what's crazy is I don't necessarily see spiritualism as a religion itself. I see it as an embracing of any religion.
Well, it's true. We accept the truths from all religious traditions, which sets us apart in many ways from a lot of mainstream religions. And the fact that we have spirit communication, that sets us way apart from a lot of the Protestant denominations that people oftentimes go to. And it's interesting because people who visit a spiritualist church service say, well, this is very similar to the church I grew up in, except for the point where the mediums come onto platform and start offering spirit communication and messages from loved ones. So that's what really sets us apart from, but the songs and a lot of the style is very, very similar. So people can really relate to it. And I think that was probably very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very deliberate.
Yes.
In the early days, because many of, especially like at Camp Chesterfield, many of the early spiritualists were Christian spiritualists because that's what they knew. That's what they were comfortable with. So if you go to Camp Chesterfield, you'll see lots of statues of Jesus. And there's that very strong connection. And Mabel Riffle was a very strong Christian spiritualist. So she brought that, and she was in charge for so many years. So that was a very prevalent aspect of early camp life, was the Christian aspect. And still to this day, our church services are in the afternoon because it gives people a chance to go to their real church in the morning. Yeah. And then they can go to their spiritualist church in the afternoon. So oftentimes they would scurry off after their church service and go to a spiritualist camp or a spiritualist church. And that's still true today. Most spiritualist church services are in the afternoon to allow people that. And a lot of people were secretly spiritualists. They didn't want family to know about it. But yet, they had that strong faith and belief in the spiritualist ideals and tenets. So,
well, and you can't really, it's hard to deny it. Once you've been to one, if you've got good mediums on the platform, it's evidence.
Well, that's what I always say. Any religion is faith-based, right? But in spiritualism, it's also experiential in the sense that once you really feel that you've received an authentic message from spirit that no one could have possibly known, that only you, and it's so evidential that you can't deny it, then no one can convince you otherwise. People say, oh, I don't believe in that stuff. Well, that's fine. You don't have to. You haven't had the experience. So those who've had the experience, though, really feel strongly about it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had not been, like, I'd been practicing mediumship. I'd been working on mediumship. I'd been doing it, but I had not gone to a spiritualist service until when camp reopened after COVID.
So was Camp Chesterfield your first experience in a spiritualist church?
It was.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't understand. I had no idea. Like, I just thought, when I thought of mediumship, I just thought of like John Edward, Teresa Caputo, like all the famous stars, right? Or the ones that I'd been to, like even locally, not necessarily just famous ones, but they didn't talk about that stuff. It was all based in astrology, but also still very science-based. I feel like I was not drawn to the people who were just like, oh, it is because I say it is.
Yeah.
No, still very evidence-based. So then once I was able to get...
Camp Chesterfield mediums are called name callers. And I learned that when I was in, meaning name callers means that they give evidential names in their messages.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you go to some church services, I'm being impressed with a female figure, older. Does that resonate with you or something? And well, everyone has that, right? exactly. Or they'll come up with the name Mary. Well, who doesn't have a Mary in their family somewhere, So, but at Camp Chesterfield, the mediums are taught to come up with names, evidential names, like even first, middle, and last sometimes. So that really makes the big difference, and that really helps people to feel like they've had a connection, a real true spirit connection.
Right. Yeah, the funny is I had done platform at Super Gala last September.
Oh, I remember I was there.
I know. And I remember going backstage. I'm like, I really need to get names. That's what I really need to get. I need to do more names. And then I got on stage. I'm like, oh, I'm just okay. I'm not dialing it in. I'm going to step this up. And all of a sudden I'm just like, and grandfather named Joe, like it just fell out of my face. I'm like, let's go. Okay,
yeah,
Spirit.
That's right. Because Spirit will give you the information
if
you ask for it. So,
and I also fully believe that when you are in the presence of other really great mediums, and I was on both nights, which was crazy. But the first night it was with Michelle Euler.
Yes.
And
she gave me the most wonderful message that, was so evidential. Because she said, I'm being impressed with a woman named Vera. Well, my mother's name's Vera, but she immediately said, but she didn't like the name Vera. She went by another name. And see, that was my mother. And she's doing hair. Well, I grew up in a beauty shop. My mother was a beautician when I was a child. She changed careers when I was in high school. But when I was a small child, we had a beauty shop in our house. So it was just one thing after another. So I, of course, had to accept that message. And I knew it was for me. And very impressive, though, from Reverend Michelle. It was a wonderful message.
She's phenomenal. She's the one that told me I was a medium. I'd been working for years at tarot, and I was doing, I was like, but I'm not a medium. And she was like, what do you think a medium is? And I said, you got to see the dead people.
Right.
And I was like, and I don't see them. And she's like, so you're telling me that when you do cards and you're like, but I feel like there's a grandmother here and you're giving a message, you don't think that's mediumship? I was like, no, because I can't see them.
Yeah.
Also, this goes back to what you and I were talking about before the camera was rolling about education and understanding what we're working with and having a mentor, having classes.
Very important. Very important.
So, but yeah, so I did not know that Camp Chesterfield was called the Name Callers, but
that's kind of a nickname that I've heard in passing from other people. Oh, you go to camp, they're the Name Callers, meaning, that they get evidential names.
We do, but I also feel like, our mentors, the ones who fill those shoes as mentors on camp. I know, like Reverend Glenda, she takes no prisoners, man. She will push me so hard. She'll be like, but what else? But what else? Okay, so what's the name? Why are you not honoring that? And she'll do it in a loving way. However, like, she has pushed me pretty hard to believe that, you know what, you just got to honor what you see, hear, and say. Like, you say what you see, hear, and get. Like, it's not your job to interpret it. And
I took a trance development course with her years ago, and she sat right in front of me, held my hands, and she said, now bring your spirit through, ask them to come. And another medium was sitting next to me, Jeremy Kaler, and he felt the heat come off my body as and Reverend Glenda just very innocently said, is she African? And I said, yes, she is. My main guide is an African guide, spirit guide. And that's kind of unusual. Not very many people have that. So, and I had met her and I knew of her, but I'd never brought her through like that. That was a very powerful experience for me.
That's amazing.
She's a wonderful teacher, development teacher.
I've been studying trance with her for 3 years now.
That's the best, because she learned from the best. Her teacher was Louise, of course.
Louise.
Irvin.
Yeah. And every once in a while, what I find fascinating on a sidebar is that sometimes in trance class with her, when we're in the seance room, I'll feel Reverend Louise come in and sit down, and I'll think of course,
no doubt. No doubt.
She's like right there with me, and then and I can feel her attention on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and I'd never met her. She's been gone like since before.
Yeah.
I was part of
Reverend Louise had a really good knack for seeing wonderful mediumship talent. And I mean, wild horses wouldn't keep her spirit away from camp, I swear. She's there. She's all about it. You know, she's all around. I mean,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. She's pretty fantastic energy to pick up when I'm in.
Well, powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And talk about a woman of substance. My goodness. I mean, she just embodied it, being a woman of substance. She was such a powerful medium, but she was such a wonderful minister and pastor, as well as neighbor and resident and camp president. My goodness. I mean, she wore many hats at that camp. So
yeah,
I don't think I'd be exaggerating to say, you know, there's Mabel Riffle, who's kind of at the pinnacle, but I think Reverend Louise is pretty high up there as far as what she did for camp, because she was there in the 70s, I think, maybe even the late 60s. But she spent a long time there, and she did a lot of work, a lot of very valuable, good work.
Yeah, and you can see that just in, well, if I just look at the substance that Reverend Glenda brings, like if we just take a tiny piece of our own mentors up into ourselves, looking at Reverend Glenda, who's a powerhouse,
right?
I can't imagine the energy that Reverend Louise had. Well, I can, because I've been with, like,
well, you've experienced it.
I've experienced it, and I feel like at one point I could have. I feel like she was willing to step in and let me speak for her, like to speak through me, which might be on the agenda someday. I don't know. How cool would that be? That'd be to do that.
It'll happen.
It'll happen.
Yeah,
it'll happen. I do not miss my trance classes unless I absolutely can't make it for whatever reason. I love those. So now for you in your development, like, I love trance work. I still love mediumship. I feel like I do a good balance of both. I like to use both. I feel like they're different muscles, completely different muscles, even though they're doing the same job. And what do you think? Where do you sit with your practice? Like, do you prefer, as Reverend Glenda would ask, what's more natural for you? Mental mediumship or trance mediumship? Like, where do you practice?
It would be mental for me. Always working towards, doing more of the physical mediumship, but mental mediumship tends to be where I tend to stay in that lane. And part of it's because I have a very hard time letting go completely to allow that spirit to come over. And I've been to trance seances in the chapel where, the medium is completely, I'm not catatonic, but like asleep. And, the spirit is doing all the talking and everything. So, you have to be able to set aside your own personal ego and control issues and things. And I guess I just haven't gotten to that point yet.
Well, I'll do trance, and I feel comfortable doing. I'll do it. I've done it a few times on lives, actually, as demonstration. But as far as bringing through loved ones, like, I've not done a full seance. Now, I have brought through loved ones in the safety of class.
Yeah,
know everybody in there. That if I got it wrong, it wasn't really wrong. There was still a message in there.
Well, and you've got Reverend Glenda there that can pull you out if you get too far into it, but I've attended a lot of Reverend Glenda's seance, trance seances, and I once asked her, I said, "So where do you go during that?" And she said, "Sanibel." Sanibel, So very interesting. Yeah. So she just kind of goes to the beach as you know, the messages come through the trance, her spirit guide, takes over and gives the messages. So it's very interesting
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. I think my goal is to be able to do seance,
Mm-hmm.
not just guides, but loved ones also, because I can blend with, I pick them up, like they come in, they step in, but then
Right.
I do, because my conscious mind does not go to a beach. It still has FOMO. It wants to be part of everything.
Right.
I doubt and question, but then Reverend Glenda started teaching us a way, like, to do the mental mediumship first, to get the
Mm-hmm.
evidence of who it is, and then allow that spirit to come in. So
And
that,
I think one thing that students sometimes don't spend enough time on is symbolism. That's such an important
it's
part.
huge.
And I learned it from Shirley Shrogi. I don't know if you probably never met the Shrogis. The Shirley Shrogi taught symbols. And anytime she taught it, I'd take it because I learned something new every time. And it's just amazing how that connection and that relationship you make with your own guide to recognize those symbols. And it can be different for different mediums. That's what it's very important to have that personal relationship. And she emphasized that in her classes. And it was very, enlightening to me to have that experience, to be able to say, okay, well, now this to me means such and such, but to another medium it might not. But as long as it's expressed to the person that you're giving the message to and they understand it, that's the important thing.
All that matters.
That's all that matters.
All that
Yeah.
matters. Because
And
sometimes
sometimes I don't know why certain things come through, but I let it go, and then they say, well, that reminds me of such and such, so they can place it. So my teacher always said, give what you get, and don't try to. And I learned that lesson because one of the first seances that I led, there was a woman there, and I could feel her mother coming through. And my grandmother's name was Dorothy. So I kept getting the name Dorothy. Instead of saying it, I said, I think this is your grandmother. And she said, well, it sounds more like my mother. And my mother's name was Dorothy. And I said, that's what but then it didn't matter because I didn't say it.
I
So
know you're like, I know it doesn't count, but I just want to say it out loud anyway.
exactly. So, my teacher, Sarah Brown, said, give what you get. Don't worry about it, because spirit won't, make you look silly or stupid. So just go ahead and say it. And that person might be able to understand it perfectly. So,
Yeah. Well, okay. So since you brought up Sarah, I
Mhm.
don't know Sarah, but let's, that was one of the questions we talked about prior to us coming on camera. Talk
Mhm.
about Sarah Brown. Tell me about your mentor, about your journey into mediumship. And I want to hear about,
Okay. Well, it's interesting because when I was a small child, later as an adult, my mother told me that she thinks that perhaps I could see spirit because when I was a small child, I would always insist that there were people in the room and things. And, she just kind of discounted it as the imagination of a child and didn't really take it seriously. And as I got older, it happened less and less, and it wasn't facilitated. So, friends who have kids who say things like that, I always tell them, well, take it seriously and, try to develop that, nurture it. Don't discount it. So anyway, I remember coming home from Japan, and in my hometown of Shelbyville, there's a rather famous restaurant called Cagney's. It's a Pizza King, Cagney's. And a bunch of us from my high school were going to just meet there, just kind of a little reunion. And we sat down at a table, and one of my friends said, oh, look, there's Sarah Brown. She's that famous psychic. And I said, Shelbyville has a psychic? Where have I been all these years? And so Sarah was walking the restaurant and came up to our table, and someone said, Sarah, are you giving messages today? And she said, well, I had a group from Cincinnati that was supposed to come, but somehow they canceled. So I have time. Would anyone like a message? And I'm like, me, or a reading. I'm not a message, a reading. And I said, me. And we sat down, and similar to Michelle and you, she said, one of the first things she said, well, you do know that you're a medium. And I said, not really. I don't, that doesn't resonate with me. And she said, well, I'm telling you, you are. And so we had a really nice reading, and she could see the colors in my aura, and she really hit a lot of things on the head that I thought. And so she said, would you like to visit my home at Camp Chesterfield? And I said, what's Camp Chesterfield? Where's Camp Chesterfield? I mean, I lived 45 minutes from Camp Chesterfield my whole life, and I'd never heard of it. I've never been there. It never crossed my path at all.
I grew up in Indianapolis. I'd never heard of it until I was an adult living in Westfield.
Right. So anyway, we I went over there with another friend, and we drove around the camp, and it was very interesting. We drove around the beautiful, you know how it is, the big around the cathedral before we went over to the other side to her house. And that little stone house, the River Rock house, you know, very close to the cathedral.
Yeah.
I told my friend, I said, I think I'm going to live here someday, and I think that's going to be my house. And I was half right.
You were half right. Yeah.
Half right. So I'll take it. Take what you can. So anyway, we visited her, and then I was in the process of trying to figure out a topic for my PhD dissertation. And I'd done my master's degree on Sephardic Jewish history and Francisco Franco's role in saving Jews during World War II. So I wanted to do something religious based, but I didn't quite know what. And, you know, just meeting Sarah and seeing Camp Chesterfield and doing a little bit of digging, I thought, well, now this is a topic that hasn't been exploited or written about at all in, you know, history. So anyway, she became a very good friend. And so I kind of developed and worked on the academic scholarly side the same time I was doing my development and becoming, you know, taking classes and things. And at that time I lived in Japan. So I've lived in Japan for 36 years. So I didn't really have an opportunity to develop on a weekly basis. Of course, this is well before Zoom or internet or anything like that. And so she said, you know, I think that you would probably be a good candidate for the Universal Spiritualist Association's distance program. And so she called Ernest Nichols. Sadly, he just recently passed away within this past few months, I read on the internet. Anyway, she contacted him and took me over to Ball State. He lived on University Avenue, and his house was there. And we had a nice meeting, and he said, yes, you know, I think you would be able to do that, because he could tell I was motivated, and I was telling him that I would like to develop this personally, but also I'd like to gather research in order to write a PhD dissertation on spiritualism and mediums. My idea was I'd like to know what the motivation of mediums were and how they knew their gift and what types of gifts they had and what calling did they have to go on to become a minister. Because, you know, some mediums do become ministers, not all, but some do. And, you know, what does that all involve? So I had kind of an idea behind all that. So that's what I did. I did my distance education through them, and they had a yearly residence at Ball State for a symposium, and I attended that. And then as soon as the symposium ended, I'd rush over to Camp Chesterfield and spend as much time during the rest of the summer as I could with Sarah at her house, and just fell in love with the whole thing and the whole idea of spiritualism. And the other thing I like about spiritualism is it's such a progressive religion. I mean, always on the cutting edge of social reforms and things. So, I mean, the early abolitionists, a lot of them were spiritualists. Of course, women's suffrage were spiritualists.
Yep.
And then, of course, the civil rights a lot of them were spiritualists. And then, of course, LGBTQ issues. It's funny because Sarah once said you can't swing a purse around camp and not hit a gay person. So, I mean, it's really true. I mean, a lot of especially males are, and I asked Sarah that, and I use that in my dissertation. Actually, I asked, when I interviewed her, I said, why do you think there are so many male mediums, who, not all, but very high percentage, are gay? And she said, well, there's a lot of reasons, but she thought that oftentimes when we do this type of work, we have to be able to tap into male and female energy, which doesn't mean feminine energy, meaning that it's, femininity. It's just that male, the yin and yang of energy. And she said, sadly, a lot of men are taught you can't show emotion, you can't show any vulnerability. To cry is a bad thing. So a lot of men grow up with this, I hate to say toxic masculinity, but it is true. Yeah. And so a lot of men suppress that. And in order to be a good medium, you have to be able to, and women are very good about tapping into their masculine or male energy more easily than men are able to tap into the feminine energy, unless they're, gay, and they don't have that fear of it. They don't fear that side of them. So, and I thought that made a lot of sense to me. I thought she explained it very eloquently. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. We just had on my show, we actually had a really good discussion at one point about, and just with the people in the chat, just talking about that the balance of the divine feminine, divine masculine, and how it's so important in mediumship to be able to understand both and allow both to flow and coexist.
That's exactly right. That's how she explained it to me. And it made a lot of sense to me. She was very wise, like a sage. I mean, I would just hang on every word she said, because it was just, and she was from Savannah, so she had a Southern accent, which just made it all the more charming. She was just charming.
Yeah.
And just a lovely person. And, Michelle and Laura lived in her house. That was the house right across the street from me, was her cottage.
The A-frame.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that. I've been in that house. I love that house.
Yeah. And I mean, they redid it completely.
Oh, I know.
I mean, it was very different when she lived there. And she lived in the little brown house next to the chapel as you come down Western Drive on the right. That was her first house. And then she moved to the A-frame house, which is very common. Mediums move all over camp a lot. In the old days, a lot of them, they would move around and live on different. Actually, the Western Avenue was the most popular place to live on camp until they built the cathedral. And then everybody wanted to move over there. So even houses were moved to the other street, because when people 800 people coming out of the cathedral, you wanted your book open on the porch. You wanted your sign seen. So it was a good way to.
Okay. I was thinking Camp Chesterfield is like the size of a postage stamp. No matter where you are, you can see the cathedral. So that makes sense.
Yeah, as they walk back to the parking and things to leave the camp, they would walk down, Eastern Avenue and then Park Avenue, those two little avenues. So absolutely, they, wanted to be over there. And our street was called Tin Horn Alley in the old days, because so many of the mediums on that street were trumpet mediums, where they would bring spirit through to speak through the trumpet. So it was called Tin Horn Alley as a nickname.
I didn't know that. I love learning all these things. I love this. I love this. I love learning about camp and the like how it. I did know that Camp Chesterfield was known for their physical mediumship. That the trumpet, they all did it. And like Reverend Glenda at one point said, yeah, back in the day, like people were known to have things following them, and like physical mediumship, which is interesting
Right.
now because it's not allowed.
Well, yeah, I think that, yeah, it's not encouraged, um, so to speak. If it would happen, I mean, if there would be an outstanding physical medium that would be able to do those types of things. But, I have a theory as to why we don't have the physical mediumship that we once had, because people often, when they're touring the head art gallery, they'll see all these wonderful
All the
photos
hours.
and trumpets and all these things. Like, well, why can't mediums do that today? And one thing I think is that mediums, in the old days, that's all they did. I mean, those women would sit in meditation. They didn't have TV. Maybe they had a radio at some point, but they really didn't have the entertainment and the distractions that we have in modern society. So I think a lot of the mediums devoted so much time to their mediumship. So they didn't have a day job. Their day job was mediumship. A lot of times they were stay-at-home moms, and they would be housewives, and they would do mediumship. So that was their job. And so they took it very seriously. And the other thing is they ate only raw foods. Whereas today, I think we've got so much processed food in our diet that the whole, physical aspect of our bodies have changed on a cellular level. And I don't think that it's as easy to form ectoplasm and things that's needed for that type of work. And the other theory I have is the whole idea of all the microwaves that we're being bombarded with all the time. You can't leave without your aura being hit with something, whether it's 5G, 4G, all the different things that are going on. Exactly. So in that sense, those three things, I think, are the main reasons why mediums today just don't have that power within them to be able to do some of that physical mediumship that was done seemingly effortlessly, but they worked at it. Let's be honest.
Yeah. 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 And then that does, I've not done physical mediumship out. Like the closest I get is literally trance mediumship. Like as far as like I sat in what they called a dark seance once. I will swear to the day I die, it was the fakest thing I ever experienced. I've talked about it on this show.
What was it?
It was a dark seance. It was cabinet. It was a cabinet.
Oh, okay.
Workshop. And the person who came, it was a fascinating. And so when I even talked to Reverend Glenda about it later, and she was like, oh yeah, he's fake. Like, I feel better because I wasn't buying any of it. I wasn't buying it.
And that's what Sarah taught me. You have to have discernment.
Yes.
And, I always tell people, and that's why I'm very conflicted with mediums who say, come to my seance. It's an apport seance. Everyone will get an apport. That's very hard to promise, right? So I think that once mediums got to a certain stage where their mediumship was waning, maybe, and they didn't have the same physical power to be able to do the type of physical mediumship, then their cheating was too easy, because you've got a room full of people that are paying money to get an apport. You gotta, yeah.
Those
experiences are not. So that's the drawback, I think, of some of the mediumship, that people try to promise too much and they won't be able to deliver it. So it can be a serious problem.
Yeah. This was definitely, and this person held 3 of those in the time that they were there that weekend. I went to one, and it was weird because it was a whole workshop. It was a whole workshop on physical mediumship. And I remember sitting in the first night of class, and I've talked about this on the show, and my guides, I'm a Leo. I like to talk. When somebody says, tell me about yourself, I'm like, okay, no problem. But especially in a safe space like that, where it's good to understand a baseline. As a teacher, I want to know what students I'm working with, right? So it is important to be forthcoming and be like, okay, well, I'm a medium. I do this, this, and this. My guides were like, this is not about you. Shut up. Like, my guides are so gentle and nice all the time. They were like, say nothing. And they got to me and I'm like, rude? That's weird. And I was like, my name's Lorenda.
And that's all you would give.
And I said, and I do mediumship here. And I was like, and I'm here just to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I physically couldn't speak. My guides were like, you're done with that. And what was interesting is the person who was in charge of this whole thing had no idea that my guides were saying, watch and observe. Shut your mouth, watch and observe. And I watched this guy all weekend, watching in the background. He wasn't even teaching the classes. He had somebody else teaching his classes. He was like a snake in the background, just watching and lurking.
Mm-hmm.
Every bit of evidence that came out, evidence for the things that the apports, the dime store, whatever, stuff that came out of his mouth at the end of the thing, every bit of evidence he gave was stuff that he overheard people saying throughout the weekend.
Right.
And he tried to do it on me, but he had nothing. Because no matter what, every time someone, the only things he brought up were the 3 things that I had conversations with other people about that were very surface. It was interesting. So I was like, well, this is the fakest thing I've ever attended. Perfect. I'm so glad I wasted my money.
Right. Well, like I said, Sarah always said discernment is key. And that's very, very important to have discernment. You should be critical. You should be suspicious. I mean, because anytime you have the real, you'll have those who try to imitate it. That's another thing she used to say to me. So you have the authentic mediumship. You're going to have those who will try to cut corners to try to do the same thing, but use fraudulent means to do it. And you don't want that.
Right.
And I have to say, that's one thing I really appreciate about Camp Chesterfield is if there's any hint of any type of fraud, they're right on it. Because I mean, that's, out. I've seen people being asked to leave over the years because of things that were not kosher. So you just can't have that because that's the reputation of camp. And unfortunately, still to this day, if you do Google Camp Chesterfield, you do come up with some of those things that happened in the past. And that carries through. I mean, people still refer to those things. And it's like, good heavens, that was 60 years ago, What?
Right. We've evolved since then. Jiminy Christmas.
Exactly. But that's the thing. And I think also a lot of mediums who spend a lot of time on social media gleaning and trying to come up with information about people. And I mean, more so than ever, we have so much of our information out there that people can do some sort of research on a person and be able to find out. And it's sad, but it happens.
Yeah.
But you just have to be. That's why it's so important for evidential messages to come through, where it's things that only the person would know, that it hasn't been published or written about or talked about on any social media platform, so that they can really have that confirmation that that was a loved one that they were speaking with.
Right. Yeah. I'm very big about, I asked Spirit to bring me the non-Googleable evidence, the stuff that I can't look up ahead of time, or the things that I don't know, especially, a lot of times on platform, even I know I've been doing it long enough now that I know a lot of people in the congregation. So
that's always.
So I'm like, all right, but I'm not afraid of it. I'm like, okay, game on, Spirit. Do this. Give me the stuff I don't know, or that's not out in public, that only the person sitting in the chair would know.
Right.
Give me the good stuff. So, okay, but I want to go back to physical mediumship, because one of the reasons that I've been fascinated with you is that you live in the Bang sisters' house.
Right, right.
That's your house. And I think that's fantastic. And I've talked about the Bang sisters on here. I had Meg Wolsifer on here
Okay.
back in like September or October. And we talked about precipitation art because she does spirit art. And so
Right.
she was explaining the different types of spirit art.
Sure.
So talk to me about that. Now, did you choose their house because you were like, that's a cool house to live in, or because it's just a cool house and it was available? Why'd you pick
Oh
their
no, it was because the Bang sisters had lived there. Of course, yeah. I mean, yeah, as an historian, it's a dream, right? To be able to live in a historic home like that. They never owned it, but they summered there, so that's where they would stay when they were on grounds. And they did a lot of work on grounds, and some of their best work was on grounds. And the front porch of the house, they would even be able to do daylight precipitated paintings, where when they first started out, they would put the painting in the living room window. They would cover it in black cloth face to face. Each would sit on each side and hold it. And they had a basket of paints below.
Mm-hmm.
And then little by little, they would take it off. And then there would be a painting there. And they got to the point where they were able to do, their mediumship was so strong that they would be able to sit in the cathedral and have, or it was the auditorium then, not the cathedral, of course, before it was the building before them, before the cathedral. And they would be able to randomly choose from the audience someone, and then the painting would appear. And people would say, oh, I see an eye, or I see the nose coming in, or something like that. So they really were, and they were, of course, accused of fraud over and over and over again, but it was never proven. They could never prove it. No. And of course, the Campbell brothers of Lilydale were similar. They had a similar gift, and their precipitated art mediumship was fabulous too. And of course, the Bang sisters went to Lilydale as well.
Yeah.
The Campbell brothers really weren't brothers, though. Yeah. But back then, that was the only way they could really live together and have a relationship.
I'm picking up what you're putting down there.
Not so subtly, I guess. Yeah.
Not so subtly.
But the Bang sisters really were sisters. May and Lizzie Bang. Yeah, they were sisters.
Right. Wow. Yeah, their story is very fascinating, and I just think that's so cool that you live in their house. So when you're back in Indiana, you're coming back in September, maybe?
Yes, planning on it. Yeah.
Okay.
At first, I didn't know if I'd be able to with the political situation, but it looks like I'm going to try.
It's fine.
Yeah.
You'll be all right. And if you have any problems, have them call me.
Okay. Yeah.
Nobody's going to mess with this big Leo energy. They'll be like, oh, Lorenda Carr. Oh.
Yeah. Well, when we first moved into that house, it was interesting because it was basically move-in ready. The people before us had redone it. And actually, it's the people that now live in Lauren Michelle's house.
Oh,
Pat and Paul Hanks.
Hanks, yes.
So they lived in this house, and they were really good about redoing it. They kind of put it back to its original. Now, the original roof was a star-shaped roof, and unfortunately, a fire at some point caused the roof to be made more like a pitch roof. I do have pictures of when the roof was that star-shaped, and it would be really nice if it, were that way, but it's not. But they did a very good job in renovating it. And so I was able to basically move in. So we had the movers, because I had a home in Shelbyville that I was moving the furniture and stuff to. And we just basically dumped it in that front living room without doing anything. And that first couple of nights, my husband Shingo and I, we were very aware of a lot of stuff going on in the house. And it was like, oh, who are these yahoos moving all this junk in here, disrupting. But then slowly, as we got things arranged and everything, it settled down. But one particular time, I remember us being in the center of the front living room, and we both just smelled gardenias. But we didn't have any air fresheners in there, but it was only in one spot. It was like, and we'd go here, nothing there, right here. And it's like, you smell that, right? Yeah, I smell it. Do you? Yeah, we both smelled it. So that was something that I felt like maybe it could have been another medium, but I like to think that it might have been one of the Bang sisters. And another little incident, I was upstairs in one of the guest rooms, kind of getting it arranged, and Shingo was downstairs putting together a bookshelf, and I heard him down there hammering. And then suddenly I saw someone run up the stairway, and I caught it out of my eye. And then I heard him, and he came to the bottom of the stairway and he said, "Did you see someone run up here?" And I said, "Yes." So we don't know who that was. And another thing that we noticed in the house is at night, like sometimes it sounds like a radio that's not quite on the station. It's not staticky, but you can't make out the words, but it's a lot of chit chat. And that was the first couple of nights. And I think that they were kind of upset, the spirits in the house, that, we kind of took over their space. But it was not poltergeisty or anything like that. It was, and again, we haven't had anything since, we've, adjusted, and we keep the house nice and tidy. So they're very happy. And I made it clear, everyone's happy to stay here. We're happy to have you here, so we're not pushing you out.
Well, if you ever need someone just to go in and stay the night there to check on things, let me know.
Well, you have an open invitation. We have 2 guest rooms. Well, so why don't we plan that for September?
For sure. I'd love to come hang out and just feel the energy in there. Was there ever, I keep hearing the name George or Georgia or Georgia.
Yes, George.
Lived in that house or was part of that house?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
That's who ran up the stairs.
Oh, is it? Very good. Well, because that would make sense. If you meet Pat and Paul Hanks, tell them that, because they knew him. I never knew him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of his last name.
Yeah, I've actually ended up reading for both of them on platform. Both Paul and Pat Hanks. And they came up to me and talked to me afterwards.
George Andrews was his name. It just came to me. So yes, George. So very good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So I always wondered who that was, but that would make sense, because George and Agnes Andrews, she was the medium there, I think, and he was the husband. But he was very attached to the house. Pardon?
He was a handy guy. Like, I feel like he.
Oh yeah, I think so. I never knew him, but I have a feeling. I mean, the garage ceiling is filled with extra wood, and how Grandpa's always, well, I might need that sometime, so I better keep that odd piece of wood. And so those are all still stuck up there, and I haven't bothered it. I've left it, and I probably some of it was added by Pat and Paul Hanks when they lived there, but some of it was probably left over from when they lived there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Interesting.
Very good.
Yeah. I have to do a puzzle thing. There we go. After so long, TikTok's like, are you still there?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, well, I'm talking. So I have to do a thing.
I tell you, your setup looks so good. I look like a washed out, I don't know. I look terrible compared to you. You've got great lighting and everything. It's beautiful.
It's my wine room. And actually, this is an oil painting from Italy that my daughter got me. And I got my Super Gala sign up that I snatched from Kim before I left, because I'm like, I'm going to brag about this the rest of my life in case I never get invited back.
I don't know if you could see, I've got my angels in the back here.
Angels, yeah.
Yes. We have even though it's a Japanese home, it's very Western looking in that sense. We kind of like the comforts. We don't sit on the floor. When I was in my 40s, I could. Now that I'm in my 60s, I like chairs and sofas and sleeping in beds, things like that.
It's so weird, right?
Mhm.
So someone asked, Yessie, she's one of my moderators. She asked if you have ever put paper or paint or anything like that to see if anything would show up when you're in the house. Have you done anything like that? Been like,
No, I haven't, but that would be something I'd like to do. I've talked about it. It's just, taking the time to get the canvases and getting the right types of paints in the basket and, sitting in meditation. So maybe that's something we could do next September and see what comes through.
I think it'd be fantastic. I think it'd
Mm-hmm.
be super fun. But I know one of the things that I know you and I've talked about, like is that precipitous arts. Like they've done all those studies on the paint, the paint, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not paint. It's
Well, that's interesting. There's always been this idea that it's like the dust from butterfly wings, something organic, that it's not synthetic or man-made or anything. And I had a long conversation with Win Schroegi, who was at camp when I think it was, he said University of Michigan came down and tested a part of it and tried to figure it out. And no one knows what happened to that report, because if I could find that report from the University of Michigan, from scientists who verified that, I would just, and it's so true of so many things at camp. I mean, we've had Sarah's old house, the one, they really believe that Rudolph Valentino once lived there, and he would come to camp. And when he came to camp, he would have all of these servants with him. So they would stay in the hotel and he would stay in the house. And I was flipping through the internet and I found a picture of him with a woman, and they were standing outside a house, and there was a river rock flower vase. And see, at Sarah's old house, there was a vase that looks like at one time there was probably one of those, handmade river rock type of flower urns that they used to do back in the 20s and 30s and things. And I never could find that picture again. I wish I'd saved it, because if that would have been her house, that would have been a really nice piece, but it's out there somewhere. So if any of your listeners ever come across a picture of Rudolph Valentino standing outside a structure, a residence, next to some type of an urn like that with a woman, please send it to us. We'd like to have that, because that would be a piece of evidential, because I think we could match it to the structure that's still there to see if it in fact was, because that's always been the rumor that we had, and the house, the Koch house, I don't know if you know which one that is. It's the one that's being redone.
Okay, I'm going to say something funny.
Okay.
I didn't realize that was the Koch house until Sunday when I was there, and I stopped 3 times in front of that house and just stood there and looked. And I kept looking at the sign like I was supposed to know something about it. I'm like, why do I keep coming back to this? So now you're bringing it up. I love that.
Well, the Koch house, see, we had always heard the rumor that the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous, part of them were written there. And in the big book, someone said that what was written, that he had gone to a meditation camp in central Indiana and wrote that. Well, comes to find out, and we did find newspaper proof of it through obituaries, that one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous did live there. So it would make sense that that spirit or the meditation camp was in fact probably Camp Chesterfield, where some of those 12 steps were made or written. So, we have a lot of history, and the idea that Houdini tried to get into camp on numerous occasions to try to debunk, the mediums, and the old mediums just ran him out. He even tried to dress as a woman once to get into to the grounds. And
Yeah,
again,
there's no
as
one
the,
knows who he is.
well, and the archive, see, if I could find, even if someone donated a diary from a great aunt or grandmother that wrote, in real time, like, well, we had something interesting happen at camp today. There was, Harry Houdini tried to get in. That would be enough for me to say, okay, I think that story's true. Right. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to find anything. And trust me, I've gone through the archives,
I
with
fully
a
believe it.
fine-tooth comb to try to find any of that information. And there was also Coretta Scott King. There was stories about her coming to visit camp, but she didn't want to be recognized. So it was kind of spread like, Coretta Scott King's coming, but you don't know who she is. Just treat her as a regular person that, not a celebrity or someone that you would recognize. So, again, those are all stories. And I wish,
if you're from like the Midwest, or if you're looking for good mediums, like that's where you went, was Camp Chesterfield. Because that's where you
exactly.
get trained ethical mediums, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have money, if you have status and you're trying to connect to someone, I would think that that's where you would go.
Well, John Fetzer, see, that's a very good example. And he was at one time, one of the richest people in America. And he owned the Detroit Tigers, and he owned radio stations all over Michigan. And he grew up was born in Indiana, then moved to Michigan. But from 1934 to 1974, he came every year to Camp Chesterfield. And he had several favorite mediums. Charlie Swan, Phyllis D. Harrison's mother was another one. And there were 2 or 3 that he would regularly go to. And he was able to find out a lot about his ancestry by coming to camp. But he would sign an alias oftentimes when he'd go into the hotel, because he didn't want anyone to know, because he was rubbing elbows with people, congressmen and senators and things like that. And he was very worried about that. And I was part of a film project. I don't know if you've seen that, on John Fetzer. And we had the premiere at Camp Chesterfield a few years ago. Well, it's probably more than a few, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And
documentary film.
Pardon?
I saw something. I watched something on Camp Chesterfield and that Mound State Park area. Was that the same thing, or is that?
No, that was I was in that too.
Right.
That was just recently. That was done last year, and it's a sense of place that was done.
That's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I saw that, but I did not see the one you're talking about.
Okay, the one that I'm talking, I will try to send you a link to that, because it's very interesting. An actual Hollywood crew came to Camp Chesterfield and interviewed me and asked me about the history. And we were able to find in the old hotel records where he actually signed his name, John Fetzer. And the people interviewing me said, why do you think he felt so comfortable to write his name? Because normally he would try to hide that. And I said, I think that coming to camp was his safe space. He felt safe at Camp Chesterfield, and he wouldn't feel like he was being threatened or need to worry about any of that. So he would sign his name, John E. Fetzer, when he came and signed into the hotel logs.
Wow. That's a big compliment too, to the camp, knowing that you could feel safe.
Right. Exactly.
Sign your actual name,
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And he did a lot of the precipitated cards. He had lots of cards of his guides that he would go to seances where they put them in a basket, blank cards in a basket and pencils. And then they would go into do their message work. And then when they opened the basket, the cards would have messages on them and things. So.
Right. Well, I know that Hoyt, who's still
Hoyt Robinette,
but it has to do them off ground is the rules. But I've been wanting to sit with him for so long, but apparently like not in great health, or there's stuff going on. So he hasn't been doing them. But there's a whole group of people that are like, oh yeah, anytime we can sit with Hoyt, we do, because it's the
Oh
same.
yeah, he has a very strong following. People come from all over to sit in one of his card seances. Sure.
Yeah. So
Precipitated cards.
yeah, I'm just fascinated by all that.
And we have a lot in the museum too, you know, the historical ones, as well as apports, and we have the slates, which is a very similar type of thing. Messages written on slates, chalk, you know, things, pictures done on those.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. Oh yeah. I'm just fascinated by, I'm so glad that this worked out too, because I'm learning so much about Camp Chesterfield that I didn't know. And like all the mediums that I've never met, like I'm still truly new
Mm-hmm.
to all of this. Like I didn't get involved in camp until I guess it was 2020, because all of a sudden I had time. And then they were offering.
Is that where I met you at the Thai restaurant with Michelle and Laura right before the big gala? You remember the Thai restaurant in Anderson?
Yeah.
You guys were having dinner and we came in and sat at the booth next to you. And then I
Right.
think they introduced you to me at that time.
Yes. No, I'd been involved. That was just last year. So that was just
Was that last year or
last
2 years ago?
Nope.
You did galas 2 years in a row, right? Last year was your first gala? So
It was
last
my first time ever being on platform at Camp Chesterfield. Do you have any idea how controversial that was?
Oh, I do. I do. I've been going there since the mid-90s. I know how. I'm sure that ruffled a lot of feathers.
But I didn't know it until it was happening.
Yeah.
So
That's probably better in the
it
long
was,
run.
you know what? I was like, but I'm here for and I brought a number of the people that watch my show, that have had readings with me, that take classes with me. There were people that came to Camp Chesterfield from all over to come to that gala.
Oh, sure.
So game on, I'll do it. Spirit showed up.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that was just last September.
I'm because see, I had a cane last year,
You did.
but 2 years ago I didn't. And I remember sitting almost in the front row. So are you sure you haven't done 2 Spirit Fest galas?
I would have the sign. I'd never even been to a Spirit Fest
This
gala.
is my boomer memories.
I
playing
was
tricks on me
I was at Spirit Fest that
that
2
year.
years ago. I've been at Spirit Fest for the last 4 years. So
Okay.
doing readings, and so I did meet you. But the Thai restaurant was just last year.
Gosh, it seems like it's longer than that. I don't know. It's so strange.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Amanda said, I instantly became a fan of Lorinda Carr at Spirit Fest last September. That's
Great.
cute. So yeah, that was an experience. And that was the second year that the cathedral had been reopened, I believe, or had it just been opened in September?
No, second year. Yeah, definitely. Because see, after COVID, you know, that's how we have to kind of tell timelines anymore, pre or post COVID. I had missed coming to camp because of, you know, the whole COVID epidemic, as did everybody. And then we were able to come back. I thought sure you were on platform in 23.
No, I was not. The very first platform for me ever on Camp Chesterfield was last September. I had not done chapel. It was just the first time ever.
Wow.
So I know that for a fact, because it's a core memory for me, walking out on that stage and feeling, before I even walked out on stage, the vibration backstage I was so thankful to do it with Michelle, Reverend Michelle.
And Eleanor was with you too. And I had friends with me. Oh, I know. I love her work.
Love Eleanor.
I mean, she's just wonderful. And my friends next to me, they had a little boy, and he must have been like 1 year old at the time. And when the curtain opened and you all walked out, and, you know, Eleanor had that beautiful beaded gown, he was just mesmerized by her.
She's
He
just
couldn't take his eyes
she's a
off.
whole
She
vibe.
has a presence, doesn't she?
And she just did she was on platform for the gala this past weekend as well for Mayfest. I could not stay for it, which makes me sad.
Oh,
Let's see, who else was on platform with me? The first night, the first night was Michelle, Meg, Charles, and Reverend and then
Eleanor.
Reverend James Hafer.
Okay.
Day 2, because I got to do both days, which again, I apparently ruffled feathers, was Eleanor, Reverend Jay Flagging, Susan Hill, and then
Yes.
and Reverend Jane.
Right. I was at both nights, so I remember both those. I was getting it mixed up that it was the year before, so that's how, like lose track of time.
Right. I feel that. Like I have no concept. Sometimes I'm like, wait, when did we do this trip, or when did we do this?
It's hard to keep up with it.
Well, I think as mediums, this is what I tell people anyway. As a medium, I just live in the flow. So time has that's how I justify my lack of remembering anything. I'm just living in the flow.
Yeah, just kind of go with whatever happens. Exactly. So, and it's kind of nice having that feeling too. I mean, some people are so controlled by a schedule or what society. I mean, then that's really does work against us a lot of times, because we have all that chatter in our head. And like with meditation, no matter how hard you try to meditate, it's like, oh, did I pick up laundry at the dry cleaners? I need to remember to do that. So it's so hard to just empty your head. That's why I always really appreciate Buddhist monks who are able to really, empty their head and go deep into that meditation. It takes years of practice.
Yeah, and I don't have that attention span to do that.
Yeah, especially today with the TikTok 20-second, snippets of things. We tend to.
Yep, I prefer the 7 seconds in and out. That's you got to hook me in the first 3 seconds, otherwise. We just go. So, oh shoot, I had a question. I was going to actually say, those people watching, what questions do you guys have for Reverend Todd? Like, I'd love to hear your questions. I know we have.
How many people do we have watching? I don't even know.
We only have 9 watching on TikTok, but we've been moving. My moderators are moving people over. 0 in Instagram, but we have 11. We have 11 people watching
on Facebook as well.
On Facebook and YouTube, yeah. Yep. So I keep thinking I need to change days or change times so it's not when people are working. But then I'm like, but my schedule's terrible.
Right.
So I'm lucky to have. I hardly ever go live. I literally just go live this one day a week. We got some new people in here. Hey, Michelle, I see you. Good morning. Welcome, Sadie. So yeah, if you guys have questions, what questions you guys have for Reverend Todd? I never knew about Chesterfield and spent half my life in South Bend. Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
That's very typical. I mean, it's a really well-kept secret. And one of the reasons why I think it's a well-kept secret is that spiritualism is not an evangelical missionary religion. So people who are supposed to know about it will learn about it naturally, organically, and come to the gates. And that's what my teacher, Sarah, always used to say is people come, take what they need, then they leave. Because a lot of times people come through, they get really involved in spiritualism and camp and they'll stay, but then suddenly they'll be gone. And that's because they learned what they needed to learn. They gained what they needed to gain. And so they could move on. So, and I like that. That's a good way of looking at it, that it's not something negative or positive. It's just the way it is.
My mom's in here.
Oh.
Hi, Mom.
Greetings from Japan to your mother.
Amanda says, do you ever plan on coming back to camp to live on the grounds long term?
Yes, I would. But I think it would be more of a splitting between Japan and there.
I
retired in March, semi-retired. In Japan, it's a little bit different. It's not a full retirement. So even though they retired me, I'm still teaching as a special professor for the next 2 years. So I'm still working basically full time, but with a lower salary because I'm retired. I know it doesn't sound fair, but that's the system here in Japan. And I think, though, that once I fully retire, the summers here are just dreadful, so hot. So probably we would spend maybe the spring, summer, and fall in Indiana. And the winters here are more mild. So do something like 6 months there, 6 months here, something like that.
I feel like you and I might get into trouble if you lived here. I said you and I might get into trouble doing things if you lived here.
Probably, yeah.
Just hang out, have tea.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Shenanigans. So, okay. Let's see. I thought I had another question up here. Now, do you do any, I don't remember seeing anything on your bio about this. Do you do anything like Reiki or any kind of energy healing work?
Yeah, that's how I got started. I became a Reiki master teacher, and I was taught here in Japan. And then when I started developing, through the Universal Spiritualist Association out of Muncie, and then I was ordained by sanction to Camp Chesterfield. I don't like doing platform work so much. So I mostly do one-on-one readings, but I haven't really been given permission to do that. I can do Reiki treatments on grounds, but I've never tested to do what I call spirit letters. So what I do is my technique is to handwrite out letters from spirit. So I'm given information and then I write it out and then give that letter to the person. And that's kind of my technique that I've always done. And it's kind of hard to do on platform. It's a long time. Yeah. So, but a one-on-one is what I usually normally do.
Okay. All right. Let's see. They're healing. Looking to see if there's any. Amanda says, please invite me to the tea parties. That's funny. Going back here, looking through the comments. I thought you could see comments, but apparently not.
No, I don't see anything here.
I have an option to put them on the stage. Let me see. I'm still learning this whole process.
Well, and I'm sorry I'm not any help to troubleshoot anything. Wait, it says private chat. Let me hit comment. Oh my goodness. I just hit comment and they've all come up.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry. See, I don't know what I'm doing either.
I'm coming up on a year of using this platform, so I have no excuse.
Well, Manda, Dawn, Jane. Mm-hmm. Now, I think we've met. I've met her.
Yeah, I think you have.
Is she a baker?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we've met. So, yes, I would like to come back even part-time, and hopefully I'll be there from mid-August till the end of September this year. So that's a nice long stay. And I want to get into the museum and work on things and try to get things straightened up. And it's in good shape. I mean, there's not a lot to do, but there's always things you can improve. And one thing that we're doing that Beverly Everett is assisting with, and now Meg Wolsifer is working on, is doing QR codes. So last summer, I recorded each of the galleries a tour to kind of give a tour of each gallery, and it's going to have a QR code. So people can come in with their phone and hit the QR code and be able to pull it up on their phone and so we wouldn't have to have a docent we'd need someone in there just to observe, but you wouldn't have to have a docent give a tour, that they would be able to have that. So that's kind of a new thing that we're working on to try to get done.
I love that. I love that there is an attempt to bring Camp Chesterfield into the century, you know.
Kicking and screaming, I might add.
I know, I know.
Unfortunately, but if there's a positive silver lining to COVID, it's that, because I tell you, it's the millennials that came in and said, okay, we know what we have to do to keep camp up and running. If it was left to us boomers, we'd be sitting there wringing our hands going, what to do? I guess we have to shut the gates, but they were like, no, we can, they've got this new platform called Zoom. We can go online and do gala message services. We can have healing services, and we could do lessons. We could do classes online. So God bless every one of them. I mean, those young people, they just hit the ground running, and they got us within about a week. It seems like we were up and going, and other churches took months to be able to get a platform going. So, I have such appreciation for all the young people that stepped up to the plate and did that, because, us older people, we were kind of lost,
Yeah.
It's almost like a seance. Are you there? I can't see you. Can you see me?
Right. I am. Yeah, because with camp, it's only 45 minutes from my house, because I just live in Westfield, and so camp's not far from me. I'm up there all the time. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, I feel like I need to go touch grass at Camp Chesterfield, and I'll walk around the grounds. And
it's healing, isn't it?
It is. There's just something about it, and magical things have happened there when you get there.
Well, and I tell people, and I know it sounds corny, but as soon as you go through the gates, the energy shifts. You can feel a shift in energy. And then, okay, I'm in this sacred place. You just feel it.
You feel it. And it was sacred before it was Camp Chesterfield. I mean, it was.
Oh, absolutely. The Native Americans made it feel.
Yes. But I could never get up there. I'd never been on the grounds before. I just had been doing research. I'd seen it online, but I could never take class because I taught dance all the nights of the week. And then I also had kids. So I was just like, I can't even get away one night a week to justify an hour and a half drive time plus whatever time it took. And plus my husband's going to hate this. There's no way, he's Catholic, so there were a lot of barriers, but in the meantime, I was learning cards. I was online, watching YouTube videos and learning how to do the things. But like what you and I talked about even was, I'm so glad though, that I was able to with 2020, because not only was Camp Chesterfield all of a sudden online, all these other resources were online, because people were like, well, we could either go belly up or step into the times. So to me, COVID was very tragic on so many levels. But on the positive side was all these things, even dance studios. I started my dance studio virtually. Wow. I was hiring teachers out of New York. There were out of work dancers, out of work performers, out of work teachers, because everything was shut down.
Sure.
My students were taking virtually from Broadway dancers. Like, I couldn't even be upset about it.
What a great opportunity that is.
And we still offer, if we have kids who can't make it because their parents are sick or can't get them there, they Zoom in. They will still Zoom into class. We have the technology set up in the classrooms. So I was very happy when Camp Chesterfield was offering.
Oh, yeah, me too. Because living in Japan, I could, unfortunately, when I have an early Monday morning class, it doesn't work out because the church services are in the afternoon. So that's the middle of the night for me. But, other than that, I did try to tune in as much as I could during the COVID years to the church services, because it was just, really connecting for me to be able to touch with camp.
Right. Yeah. The first time I ever went, hi, Sherilyn. The first time I ever set foot on the grounds was the day that they did the grand reopening.
Okay.
In 2021. It had been like a year, and they had service out on the helipad.
Oh yeah. We call that the tarmac.
The tarmac, that's what it is. I was like, you could land a helicopter there, I guess. So it was really cool, because then I could That was the first time I ever met Reverend Glenda in person. I've been working with her for a year and a half. So, yeah,
Nice.
that's how it's seriously everything I did was virtual. And I was so thankful for that. And I even got QHHT certified because they were forced to do offer virtual courses. And otherwise they were going to go belly up because no one.
I was so happy when they had those outdoor services in the Grove. We also call it the Grove. Because that pulpit and the two medium benches, that had been converted into a Mother Mary statue display. And as an historian, I thought, gosh, it's too bad. I like Mother Mary, don't get me wrong, love her energy, but I wanted her to be placed somewhere else. I was so glad when the past board did that, because that just kind of brought back that pulpit and the two medium benches the way it was intended. So people could give lectures there, and then they do platform work, and then they had all the park benches out there, and it was just a very nice. And see, in the summer, it was with those tall trees, it was cool with the breeze and everything. But then when air conditioning became a thing, then mediums didn't want to do anything outside. So the toadstools weren't used and the Grove wasn't used. Everything went inside.
Yeah.
Mediums don't handle heat well. So we tend to melt. So they don't want to be hot and sweaty. So
yeah, no, I don't mind it. I like it, but it just could be just because I'm so thankful to be able to be there and be a part of it. It doesn't bother me at all. I think what we should do, you bring up the toadstools, those toadstools, they need to be redone. There's a lot of them that are, I feel like we need to can we do a fundraiser? Can we
Oh, we'd love to. Yeah. See, the Friends of Camp Chesterfield Foundation that I'm one of the founding members of is the nonprofit wing of the Indiana Association of Spiritualists, where we can apply for grants. And we brought over well over $100,000 into renovation and working on the landmark displays that we have, and also the digitization of our archives. We got a $14,000 grant and was able to do a lion's share of that. And that's why researchers and scholars can go to the IUPUI digital library and pull up Camp Chesterfield and be able to do their own research. And that's how the John Fetzer Foundation, Memorial Trust, it was called, was able to find information about him, and they contacted me. And there's still more work to do. We'd like to do the metadata, because unfortunately people will contact me and say, my Aunt Irene used to go to Camp Chesterfield in the 1920s. Can you check the hotel logs to see if she was there? And I can often say, well, you can, they're online now, so you can go in there and do that. And unfortunately, in those days, women wouldn't sign their names. They'd put Mrs. J.E. Smith or something like that. So it's very hard if there's, a woman's name to be able to know who that was exactly, because of that tradition of going by your husband's name and just putting Mrs. Brown, or whatever. So it's very hard to do the metadata on some of that, but it would be nice to be able to do that and then be able to catalog it so people could just put in a name and see if it's there. That would take a lot of work. And again, we're all volunteers. No one's gets paid. So we do what we can with what we have. And, and I remember when I asked some hotel curators to come and look at our, museum curators to come and look at our museum. And probably in the 1960s, whoever was taking care of the museum thought it was a good idea to lift those Fox Taylor records, those handwritten diaries. They propped them up with styrofoam cups. And she said, first thing you got to do is get those out of there, because that breaks down the paper, that breaks down the ink. the chemicals from those, disintegrate. And see, no one thought about that. No one knew. And so I said, what would you suggest? She said, glass wrapped in muslin. So I went out and bought yards of muslin and little glass bowls from the dollar store and propped them up with that. And, that's how I'm not a professional curator, so I can't really say what I know, but, people who are will often give good advice and things. But it's, and some people have very good intentions, but sometimes their ideas would really, detract and take away from what we have. So we have to be very careful. I remember one medium was very serious, and she said, if you laminated all the pictures, they would stay better. And I wanted to say, well,
Yeah.
lamination is kind of a permanent, once that's stuck on there, you'll never get it off, and there would be ruined. But I'm glad a lot was digitized, because if anything, God forbid, should happen, knock on wood, nothing ever does, a tornado or fire or whatever.
Well, the sign just got knocked off the.
Oh yeah, from those gale force winds or straight line winds, whatever it was. Yeah. And see, that's going to be an expensive fix, because to have it done properly, because that's an original neon sign. So it has to be probably sandblasted and redone completely, and all new neon put in. But that's such a important aspect of that hotel. I mean, that we got to replace that sign.
Right.
Exactly as it was when it's in original condition. So we need a preservationist that knows what they're doing. Just anybody can't come in and say, oh, I can fix that sign. No, it has to be someone that does that for a living, that knows what they're doing and can do it properly. Right.
Which then costs money.
Exactly. Well, and a good example is the Queen Victoria painting by the Bang sisters. One year it was just hanging, and suddenly the corner ripped off inside the frame. And it's just, it's old. And, they didn't really use canvas. It was kind of a very thin paper.
Right.
That's on frames. So, I mean, over 100 years old, of course, it's going to, disintegrate at some point. And people come in and say, because our hotel, our museum rather, it had a lot of water issues, mold and mildew and things, but we're slowly taking care of that. We got rid of all the carpet. So the carpet was just a real sponge for that type of stuff. And we used dehumidifiers. We'd like to get some sort of heating, cooling system in there that would, in the winter, add moisture to the air so it doesn't get too dry. And in the summer, take the moisture out when there's too much. So, and all those things are very expensive. That's the thing. So we depend upon the goodness of our members and visitors and donations. I mean, it's like any church, right? And there's priorities. I mean, if a building needs a new roof, that takes priority over doing something like that. So you have to triage everything, and it gets harder and harder to do.
Right. Well, I do feel like with modern technology, Camp Chesterfield is getting more and more exposure. People are going there, like they're going there more. They're like realizing, oh, okay, this is a thing. And if like I know I go online and I do just about every month for the last year and a half, I've done like the online readings. Like a bunch of us volunteer our time, $20, 10-minute reading. Everything is done online on Zoom. All that money goes to camp and the preservation of camp and doing all those things. So
God bless you. Thank you.
I know there's a number of us who that are we're really trying. We're really trying. If you live close by, I don't know if you guys know this, but like the first Saturday of the month, you can go. Like the mediums volunteer their time.
They do in the cafeteria and meet face to face and do it.
Yeah, and fantastic mediums too. Like
Oh,
I've never
sure.
had a bad reading there. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Like, and I've had bad readings.
Oh, yeah.
I've had
We
bad
all have. We all have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not there. I mean, it's the legitimate. Now, so my friend Jenny, I met her out in Oregon. She says, my parents had somebody read for them named Reverend Gloria. She was in Gridley, California. She was spot on, wondering if she studied at Camp Chesterfield. How do you become a reverend? Well, now there are spiritualist camps and all over the
All
country.
over. Yeah.
There's not a ton that are active that are still.
No, in 2015, I did my year sabbatical at my university, and I traveled to all the spiritualist camps in America, with the exception of the New England. So I was, um, I went all over. Absolutely. I went to Lilydale, Casadega, New Harmony, Wanawak in Wisconsin. I went to Ashley in Ohio. I went just all of them that I could possibly go to. And of course, the top three in the best condition would be Lilydale, Casadega, and Camp Chesterfield. Sadly, the New Harmony in San Diego had suffered a wildfire,
Oh,
and almost the entire camp was decimated. But they allowed me in to walk through to see, and you can tell it had good bones. And I have to say that every spiritualist camp I've ever gone to, those old spiritualists knew how to choose property and real estate, because I mean, they have just the most beautiful natural landscapes. I mean, mountains or hills, or creeks or rivers or lakes, something. And they really knew how to choose the real estate for the camps, because they're all just gorgeous in the locations that they are. So, but that was a very enlightening experience for me to be able to experience and go through all those camps. And sadly, we've lost a couple since then, because there was one in Illinois, I think it was called Cherry Grove or something, and seemed like it was just holding on by a thread. The one in Iowa was just holding on by a thread, and Ashley was just holding on by a thread in Ohio. So, unfortunately, a lot of these properties are being lost, and that's a sad reality of it. But one of my favorite little spiritualist camps was in Wisconsin, called Wanawak. And the reason I liked it was they did have a kind of a modern, I don't think they had very many rooms, but maybe 6 rooms that you could rent. But when you walked onto the grounds, it's as if you were walking back in time. So they didn't have plumbing in each of the cottages, and the cottages looked like they would have, like the shanties we had at Camp Chesterfield back 125 years ago. And I think they had a bathhouse where people could shower, and electricity seemed to be kind of a rather new thing, and some cottages still didn't have electricity. So it just had that nice feel, like you were going back in time to really experience that.
somebody on TikTok said, "What are your thoughts on Casadega?" I've known a number of people that have recently gone down there.
Well, my thoughts on Casadega is it's a lovely camp. It's different because it's mixed in with the community. Like Camp Chesterfield, you can see the periphery. When you're in camp and when you're off camp. But in Casadega, like this street might have some houses that aren't connected to Casadega, or businesses, and then this building is part of Casadega, and this building is part of Casadega, and these cottages are, but the rest maybe just regular people. So it was a little bit different in that aspect. But I had some really good medium contacts in Casadega back in the day, and I found it to be delightful. And their hotel is just gorgeous. It's like walking back in time. It's like a Art Deco Spanish Renaissance type hotel.
That would make sense for who they are. Okay.
Yeah, beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous. And they had a beautiful restaurant and bar in the basement called Frank Sinatra bar or something. That could have all changed by now because it's been a while. It's been 10 years since I did sabbatical and got to visit all these places. But I enjoyed going to the services there, and I tried to visit as many spiritualist churches during that year as I could too, on the East Coast, West Coast, in between. So that was very interesting, the different churches and how they conduct their services and things. The most different one I ever went to was in Canberra, Australia. I went to a spiritualist church, yes.
Really? Now, what made that different?
Well, they didn't really do platform messages. It was more of psychometry. So each person offered something, and then the medium would hold it and then give a reading from that. And I mean, there are spiritualist churches that do psychometry, but that's all they did for that particular service. And a lot of times, like at Camp Chesterfield, you might have a medium do psychometry, another one maybe do tarot or flower messages, or
right. Each of us, each of us does a different modality.
Exactly. And then, combined, and then some old-fashioned clairvoyance too mixed in there. So there's a lot of different things that are done. But that particular day of the service that we went, it was only psychometry. So I found that very interesting.
That is interesting. I would think that with psychometry, well, I guess if it's the item of a loved one, I've never done psychometry. Like I feel like somebody tried to get me to do it once. I'm like, this feels dumb. I don't like it. I honestly, I just feel like I am truly mental medium, trance medium. I'm not
don't discount it, because you're so in touch with things. I could see you touching an object that belonged to someone and being able to connect to that energy and bring something through. So,
I feel like now that I've developed where I probably could do that if I care. But I don't know if I want that necessarily as part of the main thing in my wheelhouse.
Right.
I do.
There's a risk of doing too much too. I mean,
yes.
I think it's good. That's why I kind of stick to the spirit letters, because I feel like I make a connection and my guide, connects me. And that's how we started out, by channeling. So it's natural for me. It just seems more natural to do that. So, and that's what works for me. And Louise and Sarah both were very encouraging of me that, don't beat yourself up over not, being a platform medium, because that's not what everybody does.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. The first time Glenda met me, or the first time I took her class, she says, and keep in mind, this class had been meeting for a while. It's my first time coming in. I hadn't really met my guides. I had met one, but not that. It just wasn't part of my dialogue. Like, it's just, I'd come from just like this interesting version of mediumship, right? Self-developed. And she goes, okay, so we have to get Lorenda ready for platform mediumship. And I'm like, what is that? I had no idea. And so
that's why the week-longs are so important at Camp Chesterfield, where students stay there for the week. They have the experience of going to church service each night, seeing their classmates perform on give messages on platform, and they go to development classes in the afternoon, and then they can attend seances in the evening. It's a whole week of just spirit. Yeah. I noticed Cheryl Ann mentioned, and yes, she's correct. The hotel is not a part of the camp. And that's what makes it kind of confusing for me when I was there, that it was hard to know what was part of Cassadaga, what was not part of Cassadaga. And sometimes the stores that were affiliated with Cassadaga would have a sign that says, official or certified Cassadaga, and other businesses and things weren't. So it was hard to know. Whereas other places like Lilydale and other spiritualist camps are very well surrounded to know that, okay, I'm in the camp and this is all part of the camp. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Camp Chesterfield is a perfect example of that, because it is like it's a community. Like you said, when you walk in,
Hmm. There's a shift in energy. You
a
just
shift in
feel it.
energy, you feel it and you're like, "Ooh, this is
I'm
good."
here. Right. Yes, Amanda, I would agree with you on the student services at week-long seminary are really great. Actually, some of the best messages I've ever received at Camp Chesterfield were from students on platform during that week.
Yeah. I've not been able to do week long because now what's funny is I will go up and have lunch with people especially if I know they're in town from out
Hmm.
of town, but people that are my classes, I'll try to jump in, but because of my dance schedule, because of my other business, I can
Day
never.
job, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can
Hmm.
never get up there for the week. Um, I just know every time I'm on that campus, though, when I walk around, I'm like, I'm going to live here someday. I'm going to have a house here someday. Like, I just know that I'm going to have a house there. I just don't know which one it is. I don't know when that's going to happen. But also, I have to be able to take the classes to get certified to be there. Like, so now, but you did not get your certification through Camp Chesterfield, but they certified.
Initially, I didn't. I was sanctioned through Camp Chesterfield. I did mine through. I'm trying to pull this up to see Ginny George.
Mhm.
If do you have the family name of Gloria, the Reverend Gloria? Um, I'm not sure if I would know if she was part of Camp Chesterfield. So there's so many of it, even from the 1970s. But in our archives, we do keep a good record of people who did serve at Camp Chesterfield. So if you had a name of a person, the family name, then after they finished their studies, development at Camp Chesterfield, they might have gone back out to California or something, because that's very true. We have Camp Chesterfield mediums all over the country,
Mhm.
Canada, all over the place because of that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Let's see. Hotel. Oh, Cheryl Ann's talking about Casadega, the hotel. It's privately owned.
Yeah, I mentioned that. I read that. And that's why I said that
Yeah.
it's not part of the actual association.
Right.
But
Just kind of going through these. Feel like how long? Yes, he asks, how long does it take to get certified? Now, I will say from my experience that it can take you 2 years or it can take you 10 years. It depends on how often you can get to classes, how soon,
how dedicated you are.
good you are. Not
Mhm.
everybody has, like, I don't have the bandwidth to be able to just knock it out in 2 years.
Well, and I don't think a lot of development teachers would recommend that, because the process is part of it's the mouth to ear tradition of spiritualism, of learning from a mentor and a development teacher. And that's something you don't want to rush.
Mhm.
And a lot of students come in and I want to get it done now. I want to get it done now. There's no hurry. You should take your time and be able to really and retake classes. I mean, it's funny because people say, well, I've already taken chakras. Well, if a different teacher's teaching it, take it from them, because you learn something new. Yes, there's a syllabus. Yes, there's a kind of a guideline that the teachers use to teach, but each teacher has their own style and their own information. And I mean, I took Introduction to Seance from probably 5 or 6 times over the years from all the different great mediums at Camp Chesterfield. Suzanne Greer, she did a great class like that. I think
Mhm.
I took it from Reverend Glenda once. I definitely took it from Reverend Louise. So you learn a lot. And even though you've already got the credit, you can still learn something in addition to that. So
Right.
I always tell students, don't be so rigid about not retaking classes, because if it's a different teacher, you will definitely learn something new, and it's well worth it. I wouldn't, I certainly would never not take a class just because I had already taken it and
Right.
had credit for it. So
Well, and those classes, realistically, are not expensive.
no, and they're not difficult. I mean, there's a test, but that's after a culmination of lots of classes that you do, like an overall test. And but for the week long, basically it's attendance and making sure that you take good notes and you have the information, and then you study it. So
right. Let's see. I have more questions. I have questions on TikTok. Okay, Reverend
okay, go ahead.
Jay Fledging is in the Instagram, and he says, "Does Reverend Todd know any history on the Coke Cottage at Camp, or mediums that lived there and process of restoring the interior?" I was thinking we were talking about that earlier, Jay.
Well, Jay, have we met formally? Because I know you, because I saw you on platform last Spirit Fest. But I don't know that we've actually been introduced. And I hope this next summer when I'm home that we'll have a chance to sit down and talk, because I've heard such good things about you. And I'm so glad that you were able to get that house and that you have the intention of restoring it back to its original self. Earlier in this conversation, we did talk about the Alcoholics Anonymous connection to that house. And I do have some newspaper articles that prove that the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, one of them, not Dr. Bill or Mr. Bob or Dr. I can't remember which is which, not them, but then another man who lived in that house, and his obituary said that. So we do have some information on that house. And of course, in the archives, we do have past residents who lived there. The Lizzie Koch, which was the original person who I think made that cottage. And the thing I love about that cottage, and the reason why the Friends of Camp Chesterfield Foundation were so intent on saving it, because there were a number of people on grounds who said, tear it down, is that it's one of the original 2-story shanties, cottages, that is very close to the original. Now, there has been an addition on the back, which was not part of the original house, but most of the 2-story homes have been rebuilt and extended or changed so much that you can barely see the original structure in there. One of the best cottages I like to point out when I'm giving tours on camp is the president's house right now, Vicky Corkell. Mm-hmm. Now, her house, you can see the original structure, and then you can see how they built onto the front. They had a front porch. They decided to enclose that into, like a summer room, and then they put something on the back. But you can see that original gable in the center of the house that was probably the original 2-room shanty that was probably there when the cottages were built. So that's a really good one to see. And that's very typical of Camp Chesterfield, of how they would take a house, and they moved houses a lot. The house next to the chapel, the Barbara Loft cottage, mm-hmm. is actually 4 seance rooms that were pushed together and made into a house. And of course, Reverend Glenda's, the round part, that mm-hmm. was brought from off grounds and made into a cottage. So, and they moved cottages back and forth all the time. They weren't afraid to do that. And even the annex on the Sunflower Hotel was the original boarding house where the administration building is today. So they took that huge building, horses and wagons, I guess, and moved that and stuck it onto the Sunflower to add rooms. And you can see the difference because it's not the same size exactly. So it's very interesting, the things that they did.
I got to go in the Sunflower. That's where I did that thing that happened. No, that wasn't in the Sunflower. That was at the head. But that same weekend in Oktoberfest, we got to go inside the Sunflower with a paranormal investigation. I wrote this down earlier. You were asking about people, if anybody had any information on the Rudolph Valentino, like mm-hmm. possibly.
Yes.
When I was in the Sunflower, I'd be interested to know, like, did his servants stay there, or just the Western? Because
no, they weren't the Western. It wasn't built yet.
So when I was in that building, I kept hearing Valentine, just walking through as a medium, kind of getting the vibe. And I had no idea what that meant. I thought, well, maybe they had things in Valentine's Day. So that I find that fascinating. Again, no evidence of that, nothing for me to be able to like, I can prove that. But I will tell you that that's fascinating to me because I kept hearing Valentine.
Interesting. So again, those are just stories, and I'm, who knows if they're true, but I'd love to find some type of definitive proof of some of the things that we've always heard, as wives' tales or legends about famous people coming to camp, and to be able to really solidify that into part of our history. That would be very interesting to me to be able to do that. And again, I would accept letters from, that's in an old trunk that was in an attic for 100 years, and someone found them and realized, and that happens. We're very fortunate. People will find artifacts from camp in their relatives' belongings after they've passed, and will donate them to us. Mm-hmm. And we got a call a few years ago, and a man was taking out a hot water heater out of his house, and under the hot water heater there was this box of LPs that had a screw through the very center of the LPs that went into the floor under the hot water heater. And all these old records, like wax records, were seances from camp. And Mabel Riffle. And I wanted them so bad, and he didn't want to sell them. I went with money in hand. And I was like, this would be very important to us historically. And he promised if he ever wanted to get rid of them, he would contact us again. But the fact that, why would people go to the trouble to hide them like that?
Right.
And kind of dangerous. A hot water heater is not the safest place to put anything that could be damaged, So someone didn't want anyone to find those while they were still alive. So it was his grandparents' house, I guess. So they must have been closet spiritualists, so to speak. And maybe they didn't want family to know that they did that, or maybe there's information on there that they wouldn't.
Right.
I just saw a message come up, or a question, and I missed it. It just flashed in.
Actually, so Reverend Jay, I'm going to go back over to Instagram because I don't think you can't see the Instagram comments.
Okay.
He says, we haven't met formally yet. I look forward to meeting you in person as well. Thank you for the information. So interesting. He also says, I think the AA founder that stayed there was Frank Belford Amos.
Yes, that's it. That's the name. And he owned the house or lived there. And you say you don't roar?
Oh, don't worry about that. I'm in the process of handling something. Don't worry about that one.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry, I got sidetracked.
Not at all. Not at all.
Anyway, well, we are like over time. Yikes.
And those 2 hours went so fast.
I know. We'll have to have you on again.
Because I don't think we got through everything we planned to talk about, did we?
We didn't. Nope. We'll have to do this again for sure. And because I still have all my list of questions just in case we ran out of things to talk about. But I feel like we could go on for hours.
I'll try to get a better lighting system set up here too. I just love how your lighting and system looks.
I have a ring light that.
Yeah, I need to get one of those. I have one of these little things, and it's not very good. I ordered it and thinking it was gonna. Yeah, I should get a ring light.
They're really cheap, and I love it.
Oh,
my phone sits in the little cradle, and then I've got a cool setup here. It took me a while to figure it out, but I got a cool setup here.
Very good. It looks great. Very professional.
I do a lot of online stuff, so it makes sense for me. So, well,
I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Thank you very much. And certainly, if you ever are at Camp Chesterfield and you see me out and about, please stop by and say hello, introduce yourself. I'm always happy to meet new people. And if you have any questions that you think of later, just contact Lorenda and she can get in contact with me, and we'll do our best to answer them. I can't promise, but I'll do my best to try to answer them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed
Stayed
this.
up late. And so, yeah. So, and we'll have I'll get more information from you, and I'll add stuff to my website, friends, that if you guys want to look up more of your books, because you've authored 27 books.
27 or 28.
28 books.
I should know that. I know, but most of them are textbooks. But I'm one of those professors that write their own textbooks and use them in their classes.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Especially when
the reason I wrote them was because I couldn't find anything I liked. So
there you go. There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much.
And thank you. This has been indeed a pleasure and a delight. Thank you.
For sure. All right. You can hang out here on the thing. Just let me go ahead and end this. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll talk soon.